Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you've ever found yourself staring at the glowing screen of your phone at 2 a.m., desperately waiting for a text from someone who gives you absolutely nothing but mixed signals, well, you're not alone. It's kind of become a universal modern tragedy. But today, we're not just going to sit here and vent about it. We're actually going to decode the exact neurobiology of why we do it.
Because it really begs a massive question, doesn't it? Why are we magnetically drawn to people who essentially make us feel invisible? Why do incredibly smart, capable people completely bypass safe, consistent love and instead chase partners who treat them like an afterthought? When you're in the middle of it, it feels like an unsolvable mystery.
Well, we need to shatter a huge preconception right out of the gate here. That intense, overwhelming drive you feel towards an unavailable person, it's not love, it's intermittent reinforcement. Your brain isn't experiencing true passion, it's actually falling for a brilliant but super outdated biological survival mechanism. Basically, your brain is being tricked.
So here's our roadmap to unpacking this whole neurobiological mystery. First, we'll look at the relationship slot machine. Second, your brain on unavailability. Third, the childhood attachment template. Fourth, the cognitive dissonance trap. And finally, how to actually build internal validation and break the cycle.
All right, let's jump right into part one, the relationship slot machine.
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at a classic behavioral experiment involving B.F. Skinner, some rats, and a lever. See, if a rat presses a lever and gets a treat every single time, it eats until it's full and then just goes to sleep. But if you program that machine to deliver food randomly, sometimes it takes one press, sometimes 50, the rat literally loses its mind. It becomes pathologically obsessed, hitting that lever until its physical health deteriorates. This is intermittent reinforcement. And unfortunately, human beings are just as susceptible to it as the rats.
Which brings us right to part two, your brain on unavailability.
A lot of people think dopamine is the pleasure chemical, but actually, scratch that. It's the anticipation chemical. In a healthy, consistent relationship, your brain perfectly predicts your partner's behavior. You feel calm. But with a hot and cold partner, you're only getting random emotional breadcrumbs. When they finally do text you, the reward vastly exceeds your incredibly low expectations. This creates a massive prediction error in your brain, sending your dopamine system into absolute overdrive. You literally get addicted to the anticipation.
And get this, the lows are literal physical pain. Neuroimaging shows that when someone ignores your text, a part of your brain called the anterior cingulate cortex registers it as an actual physical injury. Your body gets flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. You feel like you're in physical danger. So when they finally reply, you aren't experiencing romance, guys. You're experiencing physiological relief from a survival threat. And all of this creates what clinicians call the waltz of pain. It goes like this. The anxious partner feels distance as a threat and pursues. The avoidant partner feels that pursuit as overwhelming pressure and withdraws. This emotional retreat spikes the pursuer's anxiety even higher, prompting more demands, which just drives the avoidant partner deeper into isolation. It's this endless self-reinforcing loop of nervous system triggers.
Okay, let's move into part three, the childhood attachment template.
Here is the fascinating but honestly kind of brutal truth. We rarely pick these emotionally unavailable partners by accident. If you had a caregiver who is inconsistent, your nervous system learned super early on that love is something that must be chased. By picking a partner who mirrors that caregiver, your subconscious is desperately trying to win their approval to get a different ending. You're basically trying to retroactively hack the past.
Depending on your childhood, you're going to develop your own specific validation signature. Like if you're anxious-preoccupied, you subconsciously assume your survival depends on pleasing others, which leads to total hypervigilance. If you're dismissive-avoidant, you believe vulnerability is just inherently dangerous, so you withdraw to protect yourself. Recognizing these autopilot beliefs is absolutely crucial because it's the very first step to overriding them.
But here is the absolute cruelest irony of the chase. It's called the wanting it tax. Humans are naturally wired to protect their limited emotional energy, so they instinctively keep desperation at arm's length. That means the more urgently you over-apologize, or the more you hyper-analyze every single text, the more you accidentally trigger their biological instinct to pull away.
Which leads us to part four, the cognitive dissonance trap.
Look, When you are a smart, rational person, but you're acting submissively for crumbs of attention, your brain experiences severe cognitive dissonance. To reduce that uncomfortable tension, your mind literally writes a fantasy script. Through something called effort justification, you inflate the unavailable partner into this rare prize, telling yourself, well, I wouldn't be trying this hard unless they were incredibly special. You fabricate a narrative that they are just too damaged to love, artificially transforming straight-up emotional neglect into some sort of romantic quest.
And then you add in the contrast effect. When your baseline is set to emotional starvation, a minuscule, bare minimum gesture is magnified like crazy. A simple hey text suddenly looks like a golden loaf of love, completely blinding you to the reality that your actual fundamental relationship needs are entirely unmet.
Finally, we arrive at part 5, the way out, building internal validation.
Breaking free from this requires moving your locus of control from the outside back to the inside. First, you have to map your triggers, like noticing that tight feeling in your chest right before you're about to double text. Second, you practice somatic skills, like deep breathing, to literally ride out the uncomfortable physical withdrawal symptoms of not seeking their reassurance.
And clinical interventions can physically rewire this attachment, for sure. Cognitive behavioral therapy is great for helping you stop taking someone else's coldness as a reflection of your own worth. Schema therapy goes even deeper, unearthing those old childhood deprivation templates. You see, you aren't just treating the symptoms here, you are dismantling the slot machine entirely.
A massive part of this therapeutic journey is something called reparenting. Healing isn't just about ignoring the pain of rejection. It's about offering yourself the exact warmth, understanding, and unconditional self-compassion that you might have missed out on as a child. It's actively replacing that harsh, critical inner voice with a supportive caregiver's voice. You provide the approval from within, so suddenly external feedback becomes just information rather than your oxygen.
Now, what's really amazing is watching what happens when this rewiring actually takes hold. Your entire reality shifts. You stop apologizing for simply taking up space. You start making decisions based on your values, not out of this frantic fear of disapproval. And maybe most importantly, when you meet consistent, respectful people, your brain stops complaining that they're boring. You finally recognize that steady, reliable warmth is safe.
Because at the end of the day, the house always wins when you play the relationship slot machine. Feeding your emotional energy into unpredictability just bankrupts your present. Real, healthy love doesn't feel like a heart attack. It feels like a calm, steady breath. So, as you move forward and start looking for something real, you have to ask yourself, are you finally ready to handle the profound boredom of peace? And think about it, what incredible things could you build with all that energy you're going to get back?